today. I hereby call this meeting to order at this time, and we have advertised one item to be as a call meeting. We have been awarded a LPRF grant from the state of Tennessee to rehab the bathrooms and lighting at the pool and resurface the walking track. The grant has a 50% match. We have been invited to attend a check presentation on December 8th. If anyone would like to go with me, Commissioner Hughes is unable to attend. He won't be here tonight. He's having some foot problems. So me and Sean will go over. If anybody else wants to go, they're perfectly welcome to go over there with us. But I need a motion to authorize me to sign the LPRF grant.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion does carry. Thank you. We will now open the workshop discussion. We have no one registered to make a comment, a public comment, so we will move on to the tree board resolution. John has drafted this by request of the tree board, and they have asked him today to have this tabled for the next workshop.
And Jill's out of town, Jill Allman, and nobody else, I guess, on the board wanted to do it. I think it's best if she be here so that she can make sure that you all understand what they're asking, and so that she can relay back to the board whatever action y'all decide to take.
Okay. Jessica now has an update on the Cigna rebate.
Okay, I think I've talked to each of you all about this. Ever since the Affordable Care Act passed, Cigna has to, by the law now, send a rebate for premium if their administration takes up too much of a portion of the premium based on our claims activity and the premium that's paid in. Since the beginning of this, the very first year we got like a $16,000 rebate, and that year we shared that with the city employees. There's 3 ways you're allowed to spend the rebate. You can give it back to the city employees. You can retain it as a city to offset future premium increases, and you can do wellness programming. So at that time we implemented a wellness program. Basically we will pay for a large majority of an employee's gym membership if they can show proof that they're working out so many times a month. So we have several employees that have participated in that since the beginning. They turn in their documentation to Sonia. She cuts them a check every month. That still only makes up maybe a couple $1,000 a year. It's very minimal. So there's definitely room for expansion in that wellness program, which is also part of this. So $16,000 the first year, we shared it with the employees, and everybody got a proportionate amount. And the people who pay in premium, the employees that have family coverage that are paying in premium, they get back that same proportional amount of whatever premium they paid in. So then it went down to $1,500, and then it was $3,800. So it's usually less than $5,000 in rebate. The last 3 years, the rebates have been astronomical, and now I have a giant balance sitting in this account. That is mostly because the claims history has been better, which I don't get individual claims history. I can't tell you exactly. That's all HIPAA protected, and it's not, we don't know why the claims history changed so much, but part of that is due to retirees that were larger expenditures that are now no longer here. So our claims history has been better. We probably have a somewhat healthier workforce now than we did several years ago. So 3 years ago, our rebate was $126,147. Last year, our rebate was $16,606. This year, our rebate was $77,400. So we have $220,000 sitting in that account that can only be spent in those 3 ways. We haven't been giving this refund back to the employees because it's been so nominal. It'd be ridiculous to cut 65 checks for $35 a piece. This is a big enough amount that it's worth giving some of that back. My recommendation would be to refund their deductible amount, because that's what the employee's responsibility is for their health insurance. So if we did that for the 3 years, it'd be somewhere around $88,000. That would still leave us $140,000 to keep for ourselves as the city in case the premium increases. Now the last 3 years, and I imagine it's because they've been having to refund such a high amount on our particular policy, The last 3 years, we haven't had an increase in premium at all. So it's been level premiums for almost 5 years now. We've had one increase of less than 1% and it amounted to around $3,000. So even if we have even if we pay this out to the employees, and then we have 2 years of double-digit premium increases, which hasn't happened in years, we would still have enough money to offset that premium increase. So I feel comfortable making this recommendation that we're not just throwing this money away. The auditors did ask about it when they were here a couple weeks ago because they said, you know, this isn't a restricted, basically it's in our bank account as cash, but it's a restricted fund balance. And we don't really have any plan for how we're gonna pay it out, which hasn't been a problem when it's only $3,000, but when all of a sudden it's $220,000 the last 3 years. And we could have done this 3 years in a row, but it probably means more to get it at one time anyway, so. I don't actually have to have a motion for this, because the law sets for like what we're allowed to spend this on anyway, but I wouldn't feel comfortable doing this without your all's thoughts on it and your consent.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Okay, so when you say the deductible that the
Turn
employee,
your mic on.
so when you talk about the deductible that the employee pays in, like when I just did all that hiring, we know that if you add a family, it's about 19.5. You're saying all of the employees that pay in the 19.5 will get that all back?
The employees that have paid for family coverage, Sonia, I'm gonna use you as an excuse because you're sitting here. Sonia is one of the few employees that has had to pay for family insurance for 12 years. John Campbell is the other employee that paid for family coverage last year. Both of them got a rebate each of these 3 years already, because they're 2 of maybe 3 or 4 employees that pay any premium at all, because they pay for family coverage. So if that rebate was 2% of the premium, we gave them back 2% of the premium they paid in. So those people have already gotten rebates. It's the employees that don't pay premium, but do still have a deductible. That's the ones we're talking about now.
Oh, let me ask this then, if that's the case, was what their rebate was it equal to at least what the individuals that don't pay premium would be getting back?
What their rebate was the same percentage, like, let's say it was $500,000 in premium, and Cigna's rebate amounted to 2% of premium. So what we did was we took 2% of their premium and gave it back to them. But now those employees that are paying premium are also gonna get their deductible refunded. So everybody has the same deductible amount. There's no different tiers on deductible. Everyone has the same $500 deductible. So they will still also get this in addition. They've already been paid back for their premium that they paid in. The same proportional amount as what Cigna rebated us, 2% or 2%, whatever that was.
So it's gonna be up to 3 years.
Up to 3 years. And the way I had Julie look at this today when she ran the reports was, if they worked even 1 month in that calendar year that the refund was for, because it's done based on calendar year, not fiscal year, then they would qualify for that $500 deductible. Because I don't know which employees used their deductible and which ones didn't use their deductible, but either way, that's their cost of insurance, is that deductible amount. So that's why, since we don't get claims activity, that was the only fair way I could think about giving it back to everybody equally.
What would be the average each employee would get back?
Everybody would get, as long as they've worked at least 1 month this year, they would get $500. If they've worked 2 years for the city, they would get $1,000. If they've worked the last 3 years for the city, they would get $1,500, because they would get
But that's as
$500
far
for
back
each
as
year.
it goes.
We're only going back 3 years because that's when I got the big refunds, was these last 3 years. And you know, a year from now, if we still have a huge balance sitting here and they don't increase insurance again, we can look at this again and give them more. I mean, we can give them their deductible back next year if we want to. The reason I'm saying this is because we've gotten a rebate for 3 years, so to me, those employees who were the users of that insurance for 3 years, those are the ones who save the city money by having good
Yeah.
claims history. So that's why it
When would
makes
that
sense.
be issuable? Anytime?
Immediately, I think.
We have the money already.
Yeah,
Cigna
it's
sent us the
loaded on.
money.
I think it'd be good to give it back to employees.
I think that, as a city, and I know I'll always stand this way, I'm a firm believer in taking care of the ones that take care of us. And we have an awesome group of city employees, and if you need a motion for that, or would like to have one, I'll put it in the form of a motion that we carry through with this plan.
And give it back to the employees.
Give it back to the employees up to 3 years.
The second,
I'll second that.
any more discussion?
Just a quick question, how long, is there a time period that we can keep this money before taking?
There's not an expiration on it that I've ever seen in the legislation anywhere. So any research I've ever done about, there's not an expiration on it.
But
Like I said, the last 3 years has been kind of an anomaly. It's not been like this. it may keep being like this. We may keep getting huge refunds for the next 5 years, but we won't know until I calculate
That'd be
it.
a nice Christmas bonus too.
I'm sure they would appreciate
But
it.
even with this payout to the employees, there's still money in there to offset a huge
Right.
increase.
Yeah, we could have a
Versus
double-digit
current,
increase
so-
2 years in a row and still be able to not have to raise our budget line item for the premium.
Okay, you've heard the motion and the second, any more discussion? Everybody okay with this, to give Jessica the permission to give it back to the employees in the form of a rebate, Christmas bonus?
Sure, whatever you wanna call it, I'm sure they're happy.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion does carry. Okay, quarterly financial report, Jessica.
Okay. So these are our balances right this second. If you were super eagle-eyed and had looked at our June 30th balance, you would notice that we have about 400,000 less in the bank right this second than we did at June 30th. That's pretty typical for this time of year because we have several $100,000 in liability and building insurance premiums that are paid out on an annual basis, and we pay those out in September. So those are all front-loaded, so that is almost the difference in that. Right now, we are earning a lot of interest on our money. We're earning between 4.25% and 5.4%. And we had some accounts that were checking accounts that were not earning any interest, and we negotiated with the bank in the last month, and they've decided to give us interest even on those checking accounts that normally are not interest-bearing, just because they don't want us to move the money. This is kind of the general fund highlights so far, and one caveat on all this, normally I would give this report in October, and this would be as of September 30th. Sonia got really on the ball and got everything entered, so we had all the October 31st numbers, so this is actually more than a quarter. It's gonna be at the 33% mark, so 33% of the way into the year, because it's as of October 31st instead of September 30th. So normally it'd be 25, we're actually looking at an extra month, so 33. Total revenues, we brought in $2 million. Of course, very little of that is our big revenue source, property taxes. Most of those will be collected in December and February. Those are the two heavy months for property tax revenue. So we look pretty good, about where we are normally this time of year for revenues. Expenditures, we spent right at 30%, so technically still a little bit under budget everywhere for the amended budget. These are some of the revenue highlights. Our local option sales tax revenue, we actually just got one of those numbers today, and I'd already done this, so it doesn't include this most recent number. Before this month, we were trending higher on sales tax revenue. This month is the first time I saw it dip to less than what we got last year this time. So every other month this year, we were trending about 10% above what last year's number was actually received, not the budget number, not what we guessed at, but what we actually got last year for the same month. We were about 10% above. This is the first month, which would have been purchases made by customers in September, and then the businesses reported to the state in October. That month is the first time we saw it down. And it was down a pretty good little chunk, probably 15% if I had to guess, for that September month. So it'll be interesting to watch that and see if that's a trend or if that's just a one-time anomaly. Every once in a while we'll have a month that's down and then it pops right back up the next month. I do feel like people are gonna spend less this Christmas season, and that's just me. That's not any smart report I've read or anything, but I do think we should keep a close eye on sales tax to see if it starts. I also think our baseline is higher now than it used to be. We've had quite a few people move into the area. We are now collecting sales tax for everything they buy online. So I think our baseline is just gonna be a little bit higher than what it used to be. We are still ahead of what we had budgeted for because we do fairly conservative budgeted estimates on the sales tax revenue. So there's no reason to be concerned yet.
Do we have, has anyone put out any numbers about what the tax-free grocery quarter did, or has it done yet? Or
Well, you know, Jim, you've asked that question before, and I checked with the state, and the state tells us that we are held harmless for all of that, and that it does not affect our sales tax. However, that is assuming that the business owner understands that they're supposed to still report that sales tax on deduction line A, even though they're not actually paying tax on it. They're supposed to still report all those tax exempt sales. I doubt very seriously that businesses know to do that and are doing that like they should, which means they don't know what to hold us harmless for, and we miss out on that local revenue. So I think what the perfect world ideal is that they're telling us and what actually happens in reality may be two different things.
And do you think?
No, we haven't got any numbers on what that impact
Well,
will be.
I haven't seen any that the state's put out either, and I haven't seen any numbers saying this is what we're giving everybody back.
And I'm
So I'm
assuming,
just wondering if we're gonna wind up holding the bag on
yeah, I think probably we will to some degree.
tax.
I think your huge retailers, your Walmarts, your Ingles, the ones that are bringing in the most of our revenue anyway, they probably do it correctly, and that probably is processed with the home harmless. But I don't actually get to see those sales tax returns. I can see their business tax returns, but I can't see their sales tax returns. So I don't know if they're showing those line A deductions or not. But I think a lot, and of course, a lot of our businesses are small businesses, so, you know, whether they would, the state has sent out emails explaining how to do that, because I still have my SnowBiz account active with them, so I still get those emails, and I know that they've sent emails on it, but, I don't think that all of that money was recovered. I think it does affect the local government. Of course, it would have last year too, but was this the first year they did 3 months of tax exempt instead of just 1, so we may see more of an impact. And they probably just got the last of those numbers this past week, which was a holiday week, so I don't think we'll see numbers from the state for at least 30 more days probably, if they even publish anything then. It may be something we can ask TNL to kind of look at us for and lobby on our behalf. Current year property tax revenue, we've collected $160,000 so far, which is pretty typical for October. Again, the mortgage companies pay their batches in December, so we usually have a big bump in December, and then, of course, February. Everybody wants to hold on to that money as long as they can, and we get a lot of money, we collect a lot of money in February from property tax. So, like I said, before we were trending 9% above, and now, no, I don't know what this last month's gonna do. Here's the other funds, State Street Aid. Obviously, we have spent about half of our State Street Aid budget. That's mostly the equipment purchases that have been made. So revenue's fallen. You know, we don't have near the revenue in State Street Aid that we do the expenditure so far, but hopefully by the end of the year that'll level up a little better. Drug fund, kind of the same thing. We're a little upside down there, but that's pretty typical. We usually get more of that revenue in the last fiscal quarter of the year, so more towards the spring. Tourism fund is coming in fairly steady. I'm kind of surprised, but it's coming in pretty steady. Sanitation fund, also our revenue is still offsetting our expenditures now that we've moved the landfill expense back into general fund, so that one looks okay. This is a terrible slide because it's so tiny you can't see it, but I really didn't want to spend much time on it. It's the debt service. I don't change this slide except when we do the new budget, so this is the exact same information as it was June 30th. We have not issued any new debt. We've continued to pay down principal, so we have less debt now than we did at June 30th. These are the grants awarded. I tried to make this slide only show you the things that have been awarded in the last little bit that we may not have talked about yet. We just found out a few weeks ago that we got a Tennessee Main Street Placemakers grant for $150,000. There's a 25% match on that, and we're going to go through each one of the matches that we're already obligated through at the end of this, so you all know exactly what dollar amount ties to each one of these grants. The LPRF grant that we signed the contract for tonight, East Tennessee Development District is going to help us administer that one. It is a large grant. It's $1.1 million. The catch is there's 50% match, so the city pays $554,000 and the state pays $554,000. So we usually only apply for LPRF grants on stuff that we know we're going to have to pay for anyway eventually. And hope that the state pays half. And so far, we have a 100% success rate in applying for LPRF grants. We have never not received an LPRF grant that we applied for in the last 18 years anyway. Formula-based police grant. These grants we talked about probably when I did the June update, but I wanted to tell you these again. One, because the best part about these 3 police grants, there's a formula-based police grant, a collaborative police grant, and an SRO police grant. If you'll look over in that far column, all of them have 0 match. So this is 100%, almost $1.5 million that we can use for hiring officers, buying the radios, buying equipment, paying for our SRO officers and the vehicles that they drive, with no matching funds, 100% funded. And because of that SRO funding, I really think that that's going to enable us to retain the officers that we get off the one-time funding from DOJ. Because we were used to having to pay for SRO officers, and now we're not going to have to pay for those SRO officers. And they really think the SRO funding is going to be perpetual, like they're going to keep funding it over and over, or that's their intention. We never want to get into a position where we're like, oh, we're relying on that, and that's the only way we can fund it. But we really do think it's going to We got a mural grant for the Market at the Mill building down at the north end of Main Street for $9,000. The FEMA Firefighters Assistance Grant, John just found out about not too long ago, $141,000 for air packs, which that's something we would have to buy because the air packs expire. There's only a 5% match on those FEMA Firefighters Assistance grants, so that's an excellent grant. And I thank John and Tripp put that grant application in, so kudos to them for getting such a good grant. The next two are TDOT grants. We've had them forever. They're finally getting underway. We got, yesterday in my email, I finally got a right-of-way notice to proceed for the paving and striping of Hawkins and Linwood Road, which that means they'll take 6 months to tell us that we don't have to acquire the right-of-way, and we can go ahead with the bidding process. So maybe this coming year, 2024, we'll get to pave Hawkins and Linwood, which anybody who's had a chance to look at that street map service that we had hired to look at our roads and tell us which ones were in bad shape, Hawkins and Linwood is the worst. Like, it's got the most damage to it. So that one is a 20% match. Well, again, I'm going to go through what dollar amounts on what every one of those matches are. And that is the surface transportation funds. Those come from the state of Tennessee. They hold them in an account at the state. So we don't currently have this cash in our bank account. It's the state holds the funds, and then they allow us to spend it out of there. The 20% match comes from State Street Aid. So that's how that works. Once we spend out that money on Hawkins and Linwood, they'll continue to replenish it, and we'll have to pick another project that qualifies to spend STP funds. We're not allowed to pave every road with STP funds because only certain ones qualify. They have to meet certain qualifications to qualify for those. But so it's time to start kind of looking at what the next project might be and plan on it being 5 years out, because that's how long it takes to get TDOT to do a STP project. The TDOT multimodal grant is only a 5% match, which is amazing to have a TDOT grant with only 5% match. It's $941,000. That's the intention to construct a multi-use path that runs from in front of People's Bank down to Farmer's Furniture. We met with that engineer last week, right before Thanksgiving. There's a lot of businesses located along that corridor. So the problem is you've got a path, and then you've got a break where you let a business in and out, and then you've got another path, and you've got a break where you let a business in and out. So there's a couple options that we have to look at on that, and probably we need to sit down with those business owners and let them look at that plan and tell us, I hate that, or yeah, or whatever. It's all on our right-of-way. So the good news is we don't have to spend a single dime on acquiring right-of-way or buying up any property. Everything's already on State Highway 11's right-of-way. So really, it's the state's property to do with what they want, and if we want to put a sidewalk there, they'll let us. But per Chief Byron's recommendation, I think it's a good idea to talk to the business owners about the ingress and egress to their properties, because there's some funny little property lines around there that you don't really realize until you look it up and actually get it on a piece of paper. So we'll be trying to meet with them probably in January and show them the design the engineer's supposed to send back to us.
Does that 5% also come from State Street Aid?
That 5% also comes from State Street Aid. And I'm going to break it down by fund at the end, Joanna, so you'll know exactly how much is covered from State Street Aid and how much comes from the general fund. Then our federal COVID funds, we have until April of 2026 to spend these out. 1.7 million was the starting amount. Of course, there was no match on that. That was just given by the federal government. That's in the account that's earning the most interest, and since July 1st, we have earned $25,000 just in interest off that money. So I'm holding on to that every day that I can to get a little more interest. Obviously, when we close on the utility building, $1 million of that is going to leave. So that's gonna be a hit. But it's nice to earn that interest while we can, and that's something that we did not budget to spend, so we will have a little bit of excess fund there at the end just from the interest. We got an adult changing table grant for like adults with disabilities that the parents need help having a changing table. That was $3,500. It was awarded this June, and we have 6 more months to spend it, I think. So we're talking to Sean about where exactly that can be safely placed and where it would be best used. We might try and tie that in with the LPRF grant and put that in the new bathrooms at the pool, but we'll see.
Does that 3,500 cover one?
Covers more than adult changing station, which we don't want them everywhere, Joanna, because sometimes people do other activities besides change people on the adult changing station. So we gotta be kind of careful about where we put that. That's Sean's problem. I applied for the grant without even telling him about it, so no, he's gotta figure out what to do with it.
I think we're gonna put his face in.
It's gonna go in the Parks and Rec building. TVA gave us a a grant to add Wi-Fi at the recreation complex for $15,000. That says 50% match, but I don't think that's right. I think it was a 10% match. Eric Hicks actually got that for us from the utility board, so that Wi-Fi's been installed at the recreation complex, and it's a free public network. TDOT planning grant, we just closed out. That's the one that did the plans for everywhere from 68 to 322. That was $125,000. Again, that says 10% match. We didn't have a match on that. That must have been an old cell that I forgot to overcover. There's no match on that TDOT planning grant. TDOT 100% paid for that. ARC, they awarded Sweetwater Utility Board for water improvements $500,000. We haven't, they're under construction now. It's a 30% match with the utility board's paying. And I think they're using the COVID money that we gave them to pay that match, so it wasn't actually cash out of their pocket. We also applied for a grant for Sweetwater High School to help their graphic design, to start a graphic design class, which they have then been helping some of the local businesses downtown, which was cool. There was no match on that. We also got a small grant for the Main Street Marketplace for $5,000. I will use that towards the new fence that just got put in and some string lights to go above it. So that project's almost done. We lack the striping in the parking lot and the string lights going above the fencing. I've talked to the food trucks that are using it this week. All of the gates that allow access for the food trucks are 10 feet wide. All of those food trucks are 8 feet wide. The only thing we're worried about is them turning off Monroe Street and being able to make that turn in. It may be that they have to turn around the duck park and come in that way, like if they're coming from the Christiansburg Road to be able to make that turn. If not, the option is to remove one of the links of the fence there so that they can make that turn. That doesn't keep the traffic from going in there quite as well to make it wide enough for the food truck. So I've asked them to all give me feedback after this week about what they think and if they think. And the worst case scenario is we'll remove that and we'll hold it because someone's gonna run into that fence at some point and we'll need an extra section of fence and we'll just hold on to it until that happens. Sonia, help me remember, make a note that I need to add that fence to insurance. Now that I said somebody's gonna run into it. Broad Street, we purchased a new sound system for that auditorium. The speakers had the amplifier was turned up one time, the speakers got blown, so that we helped apply for a grant with no match to replace that sound system, and they used it these past couple months. They used it for the Veterans Day program. TDEC also awarded Sweetwater Utility Board a water tank rehab grant for $1.4 million and change. There's no match on that. It was awarded in May 2023. There's been some work done on that, paperwork-wise, but they are still spending out that money. Then we had 3 railroad improvement grants. The 3 of them combined, they're all a 10% match. Part of it paid for the new light poles that were and the new power poles that were installed in the back of the parking lot that we were able to use at Small Town Christmas, which I'm so happy about. Where each of those posts were, you're also going to see a new light pole. And that's the safety element of that grant, is that we needed more lighting on the back side of that parking lot, so the TDOT Railroad grant is going to pay for that, and there's only a 10% match on it. These are the 2 grant applications that are pending that I would like to apply for these next 2 months. The first one is a signalization grant for the light at the post office, which is the last light we have in Sweetwater that is not on a camera system or a digital turn system. It's still on a timer. So no matter how much traffic is there or not there, you're gonna wait 2 or 3 minutes or whatever it is before it turns. We applied for this grant last year. We did not get it. I can't find where there's a match, so there may not be a match up to $125,000. But the estimate from the utility board to digitize that light is $200,000. So if they give us $125,000 in grant funding, if we get it this time, we would still have $75,000 that we would have to match on that. I think that some of that work could be done in-house by the utility board, so we could talk to Eric about that and see how much of it would actually have to be cash paid out, and maybe work something out with that. But we all want that light to be signaled, especially when the interstate shuts down and there's traffic backing up there. But it's crazy ridiculous too. So that's expensive for a light. You used to be able to construct the whole intersection with that. ECD Broadband Connected Community Facility Grant. This is the one I really wanted to tell you all about. I've never seen a grant that will let us say it's for broadband and use state broadband money for basically construction costs. So we can use it for architectural work, we can use it for engineering, we can use it for adding bathrooms to the community center building that we're talking about. They have lowered, first of all, they've extended the grant deadline twice now. And they've also lowered the matching amount. Instead of 20%, they've lowered it to 10%. Typically, that's a really good sign that they don't have enough applications to spend the money that they have. And this money is also COVID funded, so it has to be spent by the state no later than April of 2026. I'm thinking they're getting a little panicked that they got too much money and they need to spend it, and they're gonna make sure we get these grants. I'm not saying we'll get all $2 million, but I think it's really smart of us to apply for this money because there's only a 10% match, and we never get grants that we can use on construction costs, like hardly ever. That's very unusual. So East Tennessee Development District's helping us prepare that application. We did have to pass that resolution in the last meeting. Y'all might remember that resolution that was declaring Sweetwater as broadband ready. We could have done it under the county's broadband certification, but then we would have had to get the county to sign off on our grant application, and they may be applying for this grant also. So I just thought it was in our best interest to have it on our own and be able to apply for it on our own. This is a breakdown. The reason it's since 2008 is because that's when I did my first grant here at the city. So I've only been keeping track of this since I started doing them, but this breaks it down by category. So, like, one thing I want to point out, Main Street's gotten, just for being a Main Street, we've gotten, you know, $600,000 or $700,000 in grants. $600,000 in grants for being a Main Street. But that pales in comparison to what we've gotten in money from COVID relief, water and sewer grants, sidewalks and trail grants, parks and recreation and playground grants, even now police grants. So a lot of people think, oh, we're putting so much money into Main Street, but it's hardly anything compared to what we're getting in some of these other categories. Eddie really hopped up there with those police grants because the first 10 years, 15 years I worked here, there were no police grants. We would get a $3,500 bulletproof vest grant every year, and that was about it. You could not find funding for police stuff. So it's really good that we're able to get these grants, especially with no match. So that's kind of a breakdown on my category. So it's $15.5 million in grant funding since 2008 for our little city. So the other things on the agenda, the eVol and cybersecurity updated policies, I gave you a big packet last meeting. These are all things that basically we have to do in order to get cybersecurity coverage. Landon has helped put those together and we're implementing them. We have those manuals. We have a plan for what happens if there's a cybersecurity or a ransomware attack. It's in the vault and all color-coded and ready to go in case something happens now. The other thing is MTAS is looking at a comprehensive overhaul of all of our HR policies. Most of them, well, Jim Stutz wrote the handbook when he was mayor, and that's probably the last time we had a comprehensive overview of the human resources policies. So it's time to have MTAS look at that again. A couple of the things, we had an insurance inspection a couple weeks ago. John Campbell got to spend several hours with our insurance inspector. One of the things they recommended is that drug testing, and this is one of the big changes, so I wanted to point it out so you all would know it's coming, because we're not going to get these until like early 2024 as a recommendation for MTAS. But so you have time to think about it. Both MTAS and our insurance company, PE Partners, they've worked together to decide that they are going to recommend to cities that drug testing only be done on safety-sensitive employees. So if we accept that recommendation, that means you can't even pre-employment drug test an employee that's going to work in the office because they're not a safety-sensitive employee. We do get to determine what safety-sensitive employees are, though. And we do require that every employee have a driver's license. So technically you could say every employee that drives a city vehicle is safety sensitive, which I think we probably would say that. But like the office, we drive a golf cart, and we could drive a city vehicle. Every once in a while we steal the Bronco and take it to training or something. So, but y'all kind of be thinking about what you want to classify as a safety sensitive employee. Also, they recommend that we remove the probationary period. They don't like that it says, you know, you're here for 6 months or because they think that kind of undermines our at-will status. They think that kind of makes it seem like after you've been here 6 months, we can't get rid of you anymore. Even though we still have an at-will clause in our policy that very clearly says we're an at-will employer, both of them are recommending we remove the probationary period clause from the HR policies. When it comes time in early 2024 for MTAS to have all these policies drafted and presented to us, I'm going to have Betsy Cunningham, who's the HR consultant for MTAS. She's going to come and present all this to us. So you all can ask any questions you have or why they came to these conclusions, and she should be able to answer any of those. Okay, so then Jim had asked for us to talk about funding priority and capital projects. just to give you all the information that I wanted you to have, we have some things that we've currently committed to. And Joanna from State Street Aid, we've got the multimodal grant, 5% match, around $47,000. The TAP grant, which is a 20% local match, and that runs a sidewalk from the post office up to Mays Avenue. That's a $331,000 match. And the STP grant, which is a 20% match.
Tell me
All
what that
of-
sidewalk is again, the post office to what?
Post office to Mays Avenue.
Thank you.
Obviously, if we, and it's budgeted at like a little over $1 million. If we don't have to spend that amount, then you don't have to pay the match for that amount. You only pay as much match as what you're spending. So if the project comes in less than budgeted, you don't have to pay as much. I've yet to have any TDOT project that didn't come in over budget. Like, there's not been one that I can think of. So, and part of that's because they're gonna do a full NEPA. They're gonna send, this is not a joke, they're gonna send letters to the Indian tribes and ask them if there's been any impact to their tribal lands in the Midwest by us putting a sidewalk in Sweetwater, Tennessee. They're going to do a flood analysis because that sidewalk's gonna run somewhere probably in a flood zone. So it's they're gonna do a historic preservation analysis and make sure that there's no historic buildings that are impacted by us putting this sidewalk in. So it's very extensive. That NEPA process will probably take a year by itself, just that one part of the grant. So there's that. We haven't spent any of the money yet in TAP grant. We haven't even hired a consultant yet, because 3 months ago I sent an ad into TDOT and I said, hey, can you let us run this ad for consultants? And they have not yet replied back to my email, third or fourth email, so. I'm saying all that to say, the TAP grant, you could technically pull out on that one if you wanted to at this point. Because I think we only have 1 more year on that contract and we have done nothing. We have not spent the first dime on it. So, if we decide that money-wise that's not the priority, or that we can build a heck of a sidewalk for a lot less than TDOT can, then maybe that's one option that we pull out on that. Because it is a 20% match, so that's $331,000 if it takes the whole thing.
Jessica, where do we stand on the sidewalk we approved a couple of years ago from Church of God up to the park?
We don't have any grant funding on that, so that's just a matter of the board allocating
So
money.
none of these would fit?
No, they would not let us put a sidewalk in there. None of those qualify for that. These are all for different projects. So right now, the answer is, there's not any funding allocated for that sidewalk project.
But I'll agree with you, Mayor, the need's there for that.
Well, no doubt, it's more important than sidewalk up Mays Avenue.
No, it's not on Mays Avenue. It's Main Street. It goes to Mays Avenue. It ends at Mays Avenue. So it's the part of
Yeah.
Main Street, the north
Down
part.
11.
Yeah, that doesn't
Okay.
have a sidewalk yet.
But yeah, that's needed over there. You can go over there when school in the morning and the night, and you can see a need for that real bad. Maybe we can find some funding for that
I do
this
think
year.
that will be a pretty expensive project, mostly because David took me on a little field trip when we were talking about this funding priority. There are 8 or 9 concrete steps that go down into the road. So we would have to rip out those people's steps. We'd have to acquire right of way, we'd have to rip out their steps, we'd have to pour the sidewalk and then build them new steps for 8 different properties. The other side of the road has 16 power poles
Yeah,
between
it's a
Monroe
problem.
Street, and moving a power pole is,
Yeah.
sometimes it's $50,000 a pole, so I mean, it just depends.
But
There's
they-
not a good place on that road to put the sidewalk.
Them boys can do anything.
Yeah, but we get in trouble for spending money.
So, that's something we can add to the priority list, but that one I don't think is gonna be a cheap one, for sure. And there's really not enough room to go into the road more, cause the lanes are only 10 or 12 feet now, and there's no shoulder, so.
I don't see anybody up there would have a problem with those steps.
They may not, it would just take a while. I mean, I know these guys can do it a lot cheaper than TDOT can though, that's for sure.
I don't, in my mind, I'm thinking, might be, I don't know, that many steps, 8 of them up there?
You have to cut retaining walls in some of the bank
Yeah.
areas.
Things on the park, probably up towards the park, you would.
Yeah, and from, Lenore Street up to, halfway between Lenore Street.
Smith, maybe.
Yeah. Have to be a retaining wall.
So that's State Street Aid. In the general fund, this LPRF grant is $554,500. The Main Street matching funds would be $37,000. The fire grant matching funds is 7,000, and the railroad grants, all three of them combined, is 8,000. So those are the things that we've already signed contracts on. And then this would be the potential matches if we got the full amounts on those two new applications that I told you about. 75,000 for the signalization grant, assuming that the cost would be 200,000 and there was no match on the grant. And then the ECD broadband connected facilities for the community center would be a $200,000 match, and that's if we got awarded $2 million. Here are the things I threw on the list as stuff that you all have brought up before about funding priorities and capital projects. And this is my last slide, so I'll just say, you guys talk about any of these things that you want to talk about, and if we can, we're not going to start the budget until January, but if we had some kind of idea about which of these things we thought we needed to do first, obviously I know what we need to do about the grants, but until you all give some direction, I don't really know what we need to do about any of these other projects. If they all need to stay on the table until we get these grants out of the way, or if we need to pick one or two things to work on.
Quick question.
Mhm.
The amounts that were on this slide,
Mhm.
excuse me, have they already been accounted for in our budget, or?
Good question. So State Street Aid, every year, I put the matching funds in for State Street Aid as if we're going to spend that money in that fiscal year. So right now, in our current year budget, we have that match amount in for multimodal, and we have that match amount in for STP. I knew we weren't gonna get to construction on the TAP grant yet, so there's nothing in the budget for that. But multimodal and STP are in the budget right now. And they'll be in the budget again next year, because they won't get it done by the end of this fiscal year. So, that one I'll keep putting in. The general fund one, all of those have been awarded just in the last little bit, so none of those have been accounted for in the budget at all. It'll be something that we need to look at in this upcoming budget though, putting them in, because they probably will hit some form of construction. We have 3 years on the LPRF. So that $554,000 makes it a little sweeter that we can spread that over 3 years if we can do the timing right, instead of having to pay that whole chunk at one time.
Thank you. I'm assuming it's the same thing, obviously, with the new applications. What's the time frame on?
They
Just do
would
it again?
require that money to be spent by April of 2026.
26.
So Sam's asking about the community center match, just on the $2 million broadband grant. So I think, out of all these projects listed right here, the only one that we actually have potential funding for is the community center. We are applying again for another CDBG grant for that, which is $500,000. We're applying for the broadband grant for that, which is $2 million. So I think my question would be, let's pretend that we got both of those grants. And by the way, we did get to bring the commissioner over ECB, which is over both of those grant programs, to Sweetwater in September, and I walked him to that building and I said, this is what we want to do with it. So he physically laid eyes on it, and the girl Brooksy that's over most of the grant awarding. So I do think we have a good shot at it. But what can we do for $2.5 million on the community center? That's what I think we kind of need to be thinking about. Maybe first, because that's what we actually have funding for. So we're gonna acquire that building with our COVID money. But then, is there a phase of that? Because we know the full estimate is around $6 million. Is there a phase of that we can do for $2.5 million and satisfy the CDBG grant and the community center, or the connected community grant, and have it done by April of 2026? Because both of them will have a similar deadline.
So the short answer in the phasing of that project is yes. I mean, the way it's broken down, you've got the existing structure, and then you've got an interior mezzanine build, okay? Then you have front office and back classroom. All of those mezzanine, front office, back classrooms are appendages that if you had to do basically the interior mechanical, plumbing, electrical of the existing structure, and then say we just did the front end. That would be a way to phase the project over multiple years, getting the infrastructure set up on the first pass and being able to hook onto it later. So that is a possibility to do it in phases.
So from a planning perspective, we would still do the full-on drawings first, in the first phase.
What can be accomplished by doing a full set of bid documents is you set up the bid documents as add alternates or deduct alternates. You bid the whole project, and then you say, you know, phase A, B, and C cost X, Y, Z. And then you would be able to pick from those add alternates or deduct alternates, whichever way you want to see it.
So what have we authorized so far drawing-wise?
Schematic design, which is basically 15% of the overall project. But once again, like I say, setting it up in that manner to have several options is very easy to do, which gives us a lot of flexibility on the back end.
So if I got notice that we were getting this grant in, say, February,
Okay.
what do you think the first step would be after that?
I mean, as far as finishing the construction documents, that would be at least 2 to 3 months. So, did you say March?
I think we would probably find out in February, it might be March, but.
March, April, May. So, end of May.
So, also unusual, and makes me think they're really trying to get rid of this money, they have said that we can backdate any architectural and engineering work on this. So, I think we've only paid you one invoice or something so far.
Right.
I think they would let us turn that in towards this grant too if it ends up getting awarded, which is really unusual, but the other thing that brings into play is we don't have to wait on a contract start date to be able to do the architect and engineering work. So, but here's the thing, if we don't get the grant, do we still need the architect and engineering work? If we're gonna have a community center, we do. So, that's the next step, is that the priority that we wanna go after because we have funding sources for it, and if so, do we wanna authorize Sam to work on full-on construction documents, because we're gonna have to have them one way or the other? Taking the chance that we might not get that grant funding, and we would have to pay for that architect and engineering design just out of pocket. So, that's an option too to talk about.
You always kick the can down the road.
You said it's on payment plan.
Always.
Sam don't charge anything anyway, all that is in kind.
Absolutely. As long as the liability's in kind.
Well, from looking at this list here, it just seems to me like there's 2 things maybe that we're committed to. The community center and the Biggs house.
That is true.
Not necessarily to a certain extent we're
Right.
committed to the Biggs house,
Well,
but
I mean, we own it now.
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
ours. We've got to do
The
something.
rest of the SHS, what is that?
Okay.
That's taking over the high school.
So yeah, these are just everything that I can think of that's been discussed in the last couple of years that could be a thing that is a big ticket item to the city in one way or another. The Biggs house, we now own it. Sam, we had structural engineers done, came in and did a survey, and we've got the results of that survey. Sam, I think basically you said the immediate need for the Biggs house to keep it from crumbling is roofing and framing?
We need to get it in the dry, and we need to do any exterior masonry repair, just to kind of hold it in place. In reading the report, those are the two items.
That probably needs to happen.
Yeah. So what we need to do is put together a scope of work enough to get bids on those 2 items.
So is this something that in kind, we could use in kind on, like putting a roof, metal roof on it? Or does this have to be
Well, we don't
engineer
have-
approved stuff.
Well, the thing, roofing, I'm certain it could be done. The thing about the masonry, because of the work and the style of the masonry, we need someone with that type of background in dealing with that age and material. Because you can't just put the same mortar material in that. It has to be a special kind, special approach.
Sam,
Yes.
who can draft a scope?
Well, I mean, as far as, a narrative, obviously we can do that, or, we can get MBI to look at that from the structural aspect. It's just that those two components, in reading through that report, that basically holds it in place and stops it from deteriorating anymore.
Do we have a number amount on what those two things would cost in that report? No.
Samuel, is the framing still not Morrison tenon and pegged and?
Well, see, from what I'm remembering, the interior framing is deteriorating because of the water that's getting in. The water that's getting in and all the other issues it's moving the structure, which is pushing on the masonry structure, and that's causing movement. If we can get it in the dry, get the masonry shell repaired to stop any water infiltration, then what we can come and do is minimal interior framing and bracing, just in a kind of lateral force support scenario.
That's the reason I was asking, is because if you had to replace any of that, do we want to go back the way it was? Because then that's going to get highly expensive to specialized.
I mean, that within itself is, that's a call that the Historic Zoning Commission or the city will have to make.
I do think
and
it's probably beyond being able to be on a National Historic Register. I don't think that's an option for that building. I mean, I guess we can do a little investigating.
do we
Building
even-
building in Sweetwater.
I know,
do
but
we
you
want
have
to
to
go that
have,
route?
I don't know that we even care about that, but
Because
that would affect how we redesigned it too. We have to preserve it a certain way if we want it to be on the registry. If we don't care about it being on the registry,
There
it's
was a
something.
back built on to that
But
building that's been
There have been
torn
lots
off.
of modifications.
the thing about a National Register is, other than just being the oldest building in town,
It has to have a historically significant activity that happened there.
or it has to be a just major architectural contributing style,
Right.
which,
Just
It
because
would-
it's old
like-
doesn't get it on the registry.
yeah.
Technically, we could just remove the Biggs house. Like, there's no historical, anything that says.
It
needs
is
to
still the
stay.
oldest standing building in Sweetwater. So,
Would
to
you like
Sweetwater
that
it
then
matters.
forward?
We're just saying we don't know that it qualifies to be on the national registry.
I'm
No,
totally
I'm just,
kidding.
so it's not
Technically, yes,
on-
it's ours, we own it, we can do what we want to with it, but it's not on a National Historic Registry now. I don't really think that it can qualify for a national, because I've seen other buildings in Sweetwater, like the Carriage House. Nancy Baker tried to get the Carriage House, which was the first library in Sweetwater. It's a beautiful building. It can't be on the National Historic Registry. She's tried and applied for that and not gotten it on there, so I doubt the Biggs House can go on the National Registry.
So
I don't know that if we care about that or not,
To go all the way back around, answering John's question is, I think getting the masonry portion of the structure intact, so it's not deteriorating. The framing within itself can be done in a modern style of construction and still reflect and give the appearance of an original detail. So, we can make it secure, we can make it safe, we can make it dry, and still not detract from the original intent.
So you think on that, next step would be to hire a firm to draft a scope and bid documents? And you think we'd have to bid the exterior masonry and the roofing at the same time? Do those have to be done like in coordination with each other to make sure it's done right? Obviously, two different contractors probably.
Well, if you have a general that can coordinate both of those, that would be the best case scenario. because what happens when you get two subs, they're always going to say, it's not in my job description.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's plenty of reputable companies in the area that can do that. It's just, we don't wanna go at it without a documented, specified approach. So, I think we now that we have the structural report, either we get a narrative or detailed drawings. I mean, based on the scope of just those two things, it's not gonna be that detailed. It just needs to be documented and coordinated with the structural report.
Is that something that Main Street Studios would be willing to submit a price on, or do you think we ought to check with a different firm?
I mean, we can give one, but you can also, you know, do a request for proposals as well,
Okay.
just to kind of check that box.
Okay,
So, about bigs or something else?
No, not bigs.
Okay.
I'm not touching that. I was just asking questions. The Parks land, other than TMG, do they have other land that they are currently looking at?
No. There's been a couple of plots thrown out as like so-and-so's got this land for sale and so-and-so's got this land for sale. I think everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens on TMG before that's even, thought of, because price-wise, I don't think we've gotten anything that was less than $3 million. So, the mayor asked about SHS. We got a school board member here. Technically, I'm on that committee. The status on that right this second is the county says they are willing to let SHS go if Sweetwater wants it. And the answer is we formed a committee that is getting appraisals. And once we get the appraisal, we go back to Monroe County School Board and say, okay, what is their price? I think everybody's kind of hoping that that is nominal or non-existent, that it's easier to get it off our hands. And, if there's a big price on it, I don't think anybody's gonna be
I
willing
don't
to
know
vote
how
on
we
it
can
forward.
afford it. Have you all figured out a way how, if you do get it, how we can afford it?
So, in talking with the county, we met with them when there's a lot of discussion over that, and it happens every so often since I've been on the school board. People will say, why does the county have the high school and all of our other schools are city? And so anyway, we started some discussion back and forth with the county board. Hey, do y'all know a good reason or why, or is it possible that it could become a city? And surprisingly, they were very open to that. And so we met, we actually went to one of their workshops in a meeting. They brought their attorney down to see if that could even happen and how it could happen. And basically, a pretty easy process. They just have to agree that they want to, I don't want to say let go of it, that's a bad term, but they want to let go of it, and the city school system has to agree that they want to accept it. So if the two sides agree on that, then it's just a matter of negotiation, a price, a cost, that sort of thing, and then absorbing their employees into the system, that sort of thing. So basically, we met with them. They said yes, they would be open to letting it go, if we'd be willing to take it. And so the first step in all that was getting an appraisal. Like, well, what is it worth? Because I'd heard years ago that it almost happened in the 80s, but the county wanted $12 million for it, and the city just, city school systems couldn't afford that. The city couldn't. So anyway, we agreed to get an appraisal. So they formed a committee. We formed a committee, sit down with some names of appraisers and agree on one. So we did that. Mr. Bora had contacted an appraiser that had done some school systems. He was out of the country and said, we'll do a flyover initially, take some drone footage of it, and I'll email you and get back in touch. I talked to Rodney today. He's not heard back from that guy yet, that appraiser, but he was going to follow up. And so basically, just getting a starting point, like, what are they appraising? What do they value it at? But in some of the county board members that I've spoken with, there's always room for negotiation, because whatever the appraisal comes back with, the appraiser comes back with, doesn't mean that's what they're going to require to be paid for, to be paid for the price tag. So what it boils down to is if they're willing to let it go, and the city school system wants to acquire it, at what cost is it, at what price? And we don't know that until an appraisal comes back and we can sit down and negotiate.
John, how would you pay for it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There may not be a price tag per se to buy it. So one of the concerns was the employees, the teachers that have been there, that are, they're vested in their health benefits, they get early retirement benefits. So they wouldn't lose that if they switch systems. The city school system would basically have to absorb that. And so some of the county board members were like, well, if that's whatever that cost is, and the county's working on that, so they're working on their numbers, trying to come up with a dollar amount. I spoke to them today, the county finance representative, Gail Sensabaugh. They're working on getting all those numbers together so we can have an idea. Like, here's what the appraisal of that school property is. Here's what, the basically operating costs are for the high school. And so I just asked her point blank, on a yearly basis, does the high school lose money? Does it make money, or does it break even? And she said, well, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we don't lose money. It's like, I can't really guarantee that you're gonna make money, but we pretty much break even. So operating expenses, if we did acquire it, to run it, the money that you get from the state and federal government, the money that you get through the BEP and TISA and all those funding bodies, the money that you get to run the school, and the money that it costs to pay those teachers and janitors and everything else, pretty much is a wash. It's just acquiring. Are you gonna have to pay them? We don't know that until we get the appraisal, until we negotiate with the county. So it could be that they're willing to offload it, and the city school system is willing to onboard it for the expense of those teacher costs and things like those benefits. And we don't know that number until the county gets back with us. So how do you pay for it? We don't know until we get those numbers back from the county.
Would that, and I don't know, wouldn't something this expensive have to be put to a referendum?
No, I mean,
I mean,
the question is what the expense is.
That's right.
Which we don't
Nobody
know.
knows how expensive
So,
until we.
yeah, I don't think that the city school board is gonna even pursue this if they come back and say it's a $12 million price tag. I mean, I just don't think that's,
Sure, no, if they come back and say, the appraisal was 12 million and we want asking price, we want that, that's our price, like, you're not getting it, then obviously, then we know, okay. Yeah, but nobody knows that until we sit down at the table.
our city taxes would double.
I'll say this.
well, I would say this, Mayor, it wouldn't bother me a bit if that question came up and they were like, hey, it's a $12 million price tag. If you did put it on a referendum and let the voters say whether they cared enough about having SHS to pay for it, I think everybody's kind of hoping it's gonna end up not costing anything though. I think that's what the goal is.
I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth and definitely not sticking my neck out there to say that. But some of the conversations that I've had with other people involved on each board, on either board, both boards, not everybody, but some, that's pretty much the feel. Like, if the county's willing to let it go, and the city's willing to take it, it's not gonna come with a big price tag. We're not gonna ask you to pay $12 million for it. For them, I think it makes sense because it's, it's one school.
It's an island. yeah.
It's an island. It's Sweetwater, I don't wanna say a thorn in the side, but it's the only school in Sweetwater in the county system. Versus, Sweetwater City, we've got 4, and the high school's the only school that's not in our system. So it makes sense. It all lines up if it were city system. And it would basically, we don't have to deal with buses with the county. I mean, so many of the headaches that they deal with, and the communication between the two systems goes away. And the benefits of it for the city school system is, it helps us get more money from the state and the federal government, because when you add a high school, then you get to factor in so many other things, like your graduation rates, and all those things that get you more money that the city school system can't get right now, because we're pre-K through 8, we don't get that. So now, all of a sudden, we get more state and federal dollars, and our level jumps. We're a level 5 now, we jumped up to a level 5, but when you get a high school and can factor in that graduation rate and all those things, then our numbers just look even better. So if there is a big price tag on it, Mayor, look, you don't have to convince me. Like, if they say we want 12 million and we're gonna have to raise taxes to do it, no, who would want to do that? But if they say, hey, we're willing to let this go, it just makes sense, let's get it off our plate if y'all are willing to take it, here's what it's gonna cost to operate it, can you guys meet that? then to me, it just makes sense. But nobody's gonna know that until we sit down in a room with those numbers in front of us and discuss it. And that's where we're at, trying to get that information on the table so everybody can be informed.
John, short of the financial cost, has the school board discussed whether that's even something you want to get into, operating the high school?
Yes, we have discussed it, and again, it's all preliminary, so I can't speak for everybody, but we have discussed that. Is that something that we wanna do? And everybody's in agreement, like, if, you know, on the board, if you're from Sweetwater, like, small town pride kind of thing, let's get our school. And what I've heard from teachers over the years is, there seems to be a disconnect. Once our kids leave the junior high and go to the high school, it's like they're not ours anymore. Like, we want that consistency. We want our graduating, you know, our kids in their graduation rate. We want our sports, when they leave the junior high and go to the high school, like, we want to follow those kids in our system. So we have discussed it. Everybody's open to the idea of it, but the price tag, that's the big question mark. And nobody knows that until we sit down and get it.
So there's nothing about the magnitude of what it would add to what you're responsible for that's a killer for you all?
No, doesn't
It's
scare
gonna
anybody
invest
off.
in financial.
No, absolutely not. We talked about that. We got a plan in place. When you're out of high school, you add a whole nother
Yeah.
dimension there. Here's the thing about it. The people that are at the high school are good people. You know, you got the administration there, they're good people. You got teachers there, they're good people. So we're not worried at all about taking the high school on as a project. You got good people in place. You got a good system in place. We just want it to be part of Sweetwater City Schools instead of part of the county. And I'm not knocking the county by any means. But when you're at a table and you're representing 4 different districts, you're gonna pull for your district, and you're gonna, you're gonna kind of do what you need to do for your district that you represent to help them out. I mean, it just is what it is. And so, with that one school being the only school in our district, it just makes sense for them to be part of our district. So, I mean, it'll bring challenges, absolutely, but it'll also bring opportunities. And to me, I look at the upside. You can talk it to death and talk about how, oh, it's scary getting to high school, and what if this goes bad, and this and that. Well, it's been a county system for years and years and years. How many people have you heard complain? We can't even get air conditioning in that gym. Well, we got it now, but it's been 30 years. And for 30 years, to get an AC in that gym, to me, is not acceptable. Just not. Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to get up on soapbox, but I'm on the school board, and, anyway. That just is what it is.
Okay. Where are we at?
TMG, okay. I think I'm exhausted to start talking about TMG now. Okay, TMG, as far as we know, no appeals have been filed.
No, they haven't. And all of the time limits and all of the deadlines for filing anything to keep it going have passed.
So, John had a conversation about going to tax sale.
We can, if we have a tax sale of the TMG property separate and apart from all the rest, which makes sense because none of the people who show up at a normal tax sale are going to be bidding on a property that starts at $600,000 to $800,000 and potentially bid up to over $2 million. We could probably have that by June. If we throw it in with everything else, we probably can't make it by June, just because of all of the notices that have to go out and everything to a large number, not a large number, but
It's like dozens of tiny little properties that aren't really bringing in any revenue. That's
Yeah.
what else is on the tax sale besides TMG. TMG's the big one.
it just
So-
doesn't make it, doesn't make it a priority. But if we do TMG separate, we could do it by June.
So tax sale is an option.
Once it's sold, then it'll be in private hands and it'll produce whatever tax revenue that it does.
What's the zoning now on TMG, John, do you know?
It's
We looked this
R1.
up every time.
Yeah, I believe it's
R1?
R1. The low density residential, which is our big lots, big setbacks.
Okay, so someone can't buy it at a tax sale and put it in an industrial facility, someone can't buy it at the tax sale and put in low-income housing, somebody can't buy it at the tax sale and put in a junkyard.
No, it's
Nothing
zoned, the
commercial.
best thing that it could be zoned.
Okay, so there's the first thing, option, tax sale. Costs the city nothing really.
Right.
Second option's eminent domain, which we've talked about. We would have to put $2.5 million in an account. It does give us control over it then, we would be the owner of it. I think there's a 6-month appeal process probably. Is it 6 months?
We're not
A window?
we're not putting it in an account, we're paying it into the court.
To the court.
And as soon as we pay it into the court, then whoever it is
Mhm,
that owns it, that the Attorney General will approve, can take it out.
mhm. And then the third option was.
We would get our
have-
we would get our taxes out of that.
Mhm.
That's, like I said, 600 to 800,000 out of that.
So that's where we stand on TMG. And when we talked about this last time, we said we were gonna wait until now to talk about it, because we wanted to see if that appeal process ended. So, I don't know how much more we should talk about it.
I have a complaint ready to file in court if we want to do it. It's Mark Manitoff has had it for 6 weeks now and keeps promising me that he's gonna get back to me with any input he has about it. I feel confident that everything's in correct form and that that's how much we'd have to pay.
And that is for eminent domain.
Yes.
Let me ask a silly question. If it goes at tax sale, we as a city can purchase it,
We can.
so,
The only risk there is getting into a bidding war with someone. Who else is gonna show up at the tax sale?
but here's where I'm headed with that though. If, say, eminent domain, we're locked in to a particular type of use for the rest of its existence, correct?
It's tied into public use.
We couldn't
It's
let
not,
a developer.
Right.
we don't have to tie ourselves down to any particular public use.
But the reason I'm asking is, let's just say tax sale and we got it. We're talking hypotheticals, but it gives us tons more options with the property.
Yeah, because we could then enter into agreements with private developers, or we could sell all or parts of it to private developers. We would just own it.
John, what if somebody else bought it at a tax sale besides the city or the county?
You know?
Is there anything to stop us from taking it by eminent domain then?
No,
If I'm a developer and I know that a city is considering eminent domain on a property, I'm probably not gonna go buy it at a tax sale.
and if we exercise eminent domain, statute requires that the price that ends up being paid is at least what the tax assessor appraises the property at. And that's where that $2.4 million figure comes from. If we don't think it's worth that much, we don't have to pay that much. But if the court ends up awarding more, then we're paying interest on it from the date we file the complaint at 2% over prime, which is now 10.5%. So it would be insane to file it and not pay what the tax assessor is appraised at, because we know that's the statutory minimum.
I mean, yes, a tax sale is a gamble, but what's the benefit of
Well, the tax
of
sale
options?
The tax sale would be starting, as far as it being a gamble, the bidding will begin at what the taxes are that's owed.
Sure.
Which is gonna be somewhere between 600 and 800,000,
Is that just our part, or is that the city?
you know. No, that's all, that's
City
all,
and county.
the city and county. If, you know, it goes over $1 million, you can stop bidding. If it gets to $2 million, you can stop bidding. It's,
We
you
know it will take us, if we do TMG by itself, which would be my preference, Mostly because I don't care about all those other teeny tiny little properties. They'll get sold at a tax sale eventually when we join up with the county and do a regular consolidated tax sale. If we do TMG all by itself, we think we can take it to tax sale in 6 months, maybe. So, we have 6 months to decide how much we'd be willing to bid on it. Maybe have a discussion with the county about if they'd be willing to do some kind of exchange with their tax money that would, come off that sale. We won't know until we have. So I guess the question is, do we wanna keep sitting on it, think about it a little longer? Do we wanna give John direction to go ahead and pursue a tax sale? John, remind me, everything that's been appealed to this point on TMG, it stays the statute of limitations. Normally, we can only collect back taxes for 10 years. There's a statute of limitations on that. So the fact that it's been under appeal, does it stay it
No, it's.
for so many years?
It's not a statute of limitations like you only have if you think about a car accident and you've got personal injury, the complaint has to be filed within 1 year, and once it's filed, you're good, you've satisfied it. This is a statute that says that we cannot collect anything that's more than 10 years old. And there's, the thing about that is that the chancellor in Knox County found that the taxes for those early years, for all the years through 2016, is virtually nothing.
So we're not really worried about not
We're
collecting.
worried about not collecting 2011 through 2013.
Because it's such a nominal amount.
It's very little. When we jump back up to the regular, see, they didn't appeal after the year 2016. That's
Right.
not, the court didn't have jurisdiction over that. And so it goes back to the 2.4 million, 2.1, 2.4 million that the county said it's worth for those later years.
Okay,
Is that 600 to 800 figure, does that include all back taxes or
Yes.
just the chancery?
Yes,
It's all back taxes.
that's not just what the Chancery Court said, but all.
so the question is do we want John to pursue the tax sale?
So,
Or keep
do I
on
understand
doing it?
correctly, if it goes to tax sale, we go in, we get it first bid, nobody else shows up, we're ahead of the game, but if somebody else comes in, a developer, and bids 2.5 million on it, but we're still willing to pay the appraised amount for it, we could still eminent domain? Is that the way, did I understand
Yeah.
that correctly?
If they get into a bidding war at a tax sale and somebody ends up paying 2.8 million, it's gonna be hard for us to go in and claim in court that it's only worth the 2.4 million. The tax assessor says when it was just sold for more than that.
But the minimum will be at a tax sale 2
At a tax sale, the minimum would be whatever the back-to-backs are.
well,
Say
The starting bid.
800,000.
something.
And
Does that figure include the fees that go with clerk's fee and attorney's fees?
Yeah,
And that's a total fee.
yes.
But it seems like to me that'd be the best avenue to pursue right now is tax sale.
Well, when I'm saying that we may be able to have the sale in 6 months, we start now. If we don't start working on it now, then it'll be 6 months from sometime later.
And if we do eminent domain, how soon would that take?
as soon as we write the check.
Yeah, when we file it, we deposit the money and we take possession immediately. And we immediately have some liabilities for
Tearing it down.
tearing it down.
And
the
DA.
safe
And
That's
another million. That's gonna be the same however we acquire it.
If we buy it at a tax sale, would we be able to, let's say, sell a portion of it?
Yes,
Can we sell it?
yes. If we buy it at a tax sale, it
Keep
just
what we
belongs.
wanna keep maybe,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever,
Now,
we're allowed to sell it.
and also, did I understand correctly when the other attorney was here, when he was talking about the community use, yeah, it had to be public use.
Public use.
That you could some businesses there, as long as they contributed to.
Yeah, it has to be, the way it has come up in the courts was, you know, the city of Nashville's gonna spend, I don't know how much, billions of dollars building a new stadium for a privately owned football team. And their plan, the court, in their opinion, said this, they found that, yes, that is public use. One of the reasons that it is a public use is because of all of the other things that come with it. The restaurants, the development for entertainment of all sorts that come along with that. And the same would be true of this property. If the whole thing was recreational facilities and East Tennessee Orthopedic wanted to put an orthopedic clinic there
Right.
because the kids are, because they want
Or
all
even
that
a
business
restaurant.
from the kids.
Even a
Then-
restaurant, gas
A
station.
cafe,
because it's-
restaurants,
So there is a lot that you can do.
gift shops, kinds of things. You could not sell it to, you know, just any commercial business or
Right.
certainly industrial business. would
I don't
never
think there's
fit,
any
but-
reason to hold up on having a tax sale, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's
My
what
thought
I'm
is
thinking.
move forward on the tax sale, and we have 6
disagree with
months to think about whether we're gonna put a bid in for it and how much we're willing to bid up to.
By all means, we're this close.
Okay,
We're
let's
closer
put
than
that on
we've
the
ever-
agenda for Monday night.
Excuse me, we're this close, we're closer than we've ever been before. Please, start now, that's what
And
I'm.
it doesn't keep us from doing eminent domain in the future, but like John said, if what they bid in the tax sale's higher, it may increase our price on that, but.
Okay, we'll put it on the agenda for Monday night, to vote how we want to do it, so everybody has a little chance to think about it, if that's okay with everybody. But we need to go over these.
The other things, parks land acquisition, TMG might solve that problem. We don't have any other necessary potential right now, but just keep in mind, we are out of room at the parks complex. So at some point, that has to be a discussion.
Didn't you
Staffing,
already also say you're out of room here at the city hall?
yeah, we're out of room here.
Wouldn't.
Sonia is so happy you're bringing this up.
So,
Please let me retire before you make me build a new city hall. I want nothing to do with that. But yes, I mean, that is true. We couldn't hire any more staff here if we wanted to because there's no room here. Staffing in general, you know, I never want to get to the point again where I'm having to check a bank balance before we do payroll, and we had that for a few years, so. And then the other thing that came up, David's discussed it before, it may be feasible to look at paving in-house instead of doing it by contract, mostly because the size of our streets are small enough that it might be possible that with the right equipment, we could pave a lot of our streets ourselves instead of having to do APAC or Rogers Group. I think this is only gonna be a problem for the next couple of years because there's so much stimulus money out there. Everybody is paving everything, so Rogers Group, APAC, you can barely get them to come in and do a contract because they're making tons of money off federal contracts right now and they don't wanna come pave a little street in Sweetwater. So, you know, if we skipped paving altogether for 2 years, we might be able to buy some of our own equipment. So
Well,
if that's something we
A&A,
wanna
that's
pursue.
what they want is small streets.
The little ones,
Yeah, the little ones.
yeah. And as long as we can get bids for them, and I do think they're probably not taking those federal contracts, so that might be an option. And then I was like, have we talked about other stuff that I don't remember, so I just left the category other. I didn't know if anybody had anything else they wanted to ask about.
Okay,
Let me say on land acquisition, only because this was part of the 5-year plan a few years ago for the school board. We had talked about Brown Intermediate School, the possibility of selling it or leasing it if we combined and made a middle school. So Brown is 5th and 6th grade. Almost everybody else, every other school system has a true middle school. You don't see many junior high schools anymore. So middle school, 6, 7, and 8. So we talked about if we take our 6th graders and move them to the junior high, which we have room for, we planned ahead and built room for that. If we move the 6th graders to the junior high, made it a true middle school, and drop the 5th graders down to Broad Street, and you know, so that would be 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Then we would have a vacant building, vacant land. There's about 22 and a half acres there with the ball fields on them. Connects to the existing rec complex, 22 acres right there that's already connected to your rec complex, and you know, so that's just something else to maybe keep in mind too. If you know, the school,
are you gonna give that to us or sell it?
that would be my recommendation if the high school came with a price tag. If we knew we had to pay X amount of dollars for it, and the city said, okay, we will do this for you, but what do we get in return? We need land, we need space, let's work out a deal for a land swap here. We'll take this 22 acres and purchase the 25 acres that the high school sits on. You got 2 schools, you got ball fields, let's just swap out. It's a land swap deal. Now, that's just my idea, there's nobody that's
City
approved
Hall
it.
over there.
Please don't make me go into Brandon Intermediate School.
Yeah, there you go, move City Hall. I mean,
City Hall.
That's not been approved, that's just, to me, it's a pretty simple. it
Turn
makes
this
sense.
into homeless shelter. Okay, thank you, John, for that
Stamp
information.
worship, so much it already is.
Moving along, are we ready to move
I
on?
think so.
What do we have this picture for?
That's in the agenda review,
That's on
so
the
it's
agenda.
coming up.
Okay, on our December meeting, we have several ordinance on second reading. We will also have a new ordinance to close a portion of Industrial Park Road. John, you want to explain this? It's just
Yeah.
really a no-brainer here.
Yeah, and that's the picture you got there, Mr. Stutz, that's what you're looking at. So basically, when you turn down Industrial Park behind the fire hall, if you go down, so here's the fire hall right here. Master Melt owns all these lots, and there's this tiny little tract that they own right here. And this is the cul-de-sac right here. So there's this open space, it's just grass, green space, there's some utilities running through there, which they're aware of. Basically, they were wanting to know if the city would close this portion of it, because the cul-de-sac is here. The road ends right here. This old plat shows Industrial Park Road coming down there, terminating into the railroad's right of way. So it actually ended here with this cul-de-sac. So there's just this open space. They're just asking the city if they would consider closing just that portion of Industrial Park Drive. So when you do that,
It's unimproved right now, not paved.
that's right, it's just grass, there's some utilities there, but they're aware of it, SUV's aware of it. If the city said, yes, if you guys said we're gonna close that portion, then typically the adjoining property owners would basically get half. And they own on both sides of it, so it would basically just connect this tiny little 0.27 acre tract that they own right here to the rest of their property. And that's really what they're wanting to do, is just connect it so it's all nice and clean. And this is kind of the cul-de-sac that would be the border of it.
And when we look back, was it the property tax records? Something shows that it's already there.
Yeah, if you look on the
There's
map-
some document that shows Master Mill already owns this.
If you look on the map, the property deed, Tennessee property deed, which you can't really go on that for, survey purposes, but if you look at it, their map shows this coming down and cul-de-sacing, and, Master Milk coming over to here and here, so they own on both sides of the cul-de-sac. That's just how they map it. This is a survey, the surveyor, this is what he drew according to deeds. It pretty much terminated down here at the Norfolk Southern Railroad right-of-way. But there's just grass and utilities. They just want to connect it. And really what they want to do, they want to put a building right here, a storage building, to store equipment in. But it's a tiny little 0.27 acre piece, tract. So they just want to connect it all. They're aware of the utilities. They know there's easements there. They're not trying to, move into utilities. They just want to connect it all, because right now it's just kind of dead space.
Okay. We'll put that on the agenda for Monday night. All right. Library, making a request.
Okay, so Commissioner Stutz, has anybody contacted you about this yet from the library board? Okay. So Jim Fairweather and Stuart Sadikoff have both come in and asked if we can have a discussion about at least some of the library employees qualifying for city benefits.
Yes,
Okay.
Jim Fairweather.
Okay, so I told them they needed to come to the board to start that discussion, so that's what they're planning on coming for in that board meeting. There's not a rule against that by Cigna or by TCRS standards, which I think is what they're interested in, health insurance and retirement insurance. It comes down to the cost, it's a significant cost, so, I think they wanna start a discussion about that, find out if it's possible. I think their primary concern is retaining employees, being able to offer a benefits package that they don't currently offer to those employees, so.
How many employees are involved here, Tanya?
Right now, there's myself, 4 employees, and a custodian. Everybody is considered part-time.
Okay,
Anyway, that's what they're gonna be coming and asking about in that
at the
meeting.
cost of,
A lot.
she said 5 or 6.
There's 6 total. If you
6
count the
total.
cook, if you're counting the custodian, there's 6 total.
Okay, put that on the agenda, we'll, any questions about this?
I almost wonder if, and you guys can talk about this in that meeting, when they come and make their requests, that way you can hear it from their mouth. If maybe we don't appoint a subcommittee or something to kind of look at that and calculate costs, calculate options, see what the pros and cons are, and bring back a recommendation to the board for our budget process.